Welcome to this special edition of the DPW podcast, live from the floor of DPW New York, where procurement, technology, and innovation converge. I'm your host, Michelle Vita, and today we're exploring the biggest ideas shaping the future of business and transforming procurement as we know it. Let's dive right in. So, hey, Kevin.
Hi, nice
What's
to see
going
you.
on? Yeah, nice to see you. So, today we're going to talk about taking AI from pilot to scale. So, obviously, the conference has been really AI forward, and I'm super excited to hear, what you've been doing. So I think to set the stage, it would be helpful if you could just talk a little bit about what kind of company you're at, and sort of the stage of your procurement team.
Sure. I think this is going to be a really important part of the conversation because it's a
Definitely.
financial services company, heavily regulated, risk adverse, and believe it or not, the procurement function has only been in this company for about 5 years.
Okay.
So as AI is a kind of a fairly new technology, so is procurement in our company, and we're a regulated risk adverse company. So there's going to be some interesting things we talk about as part of our journey.
Right, right. So tell me a little bit about the AI journey. What's going on at your company today?
Well, one thing we wanted to do is start small. You've got to be ahead of the curve, but to be ahead of the curve, you actually have to dive in at some point. So start small. What we did is we took a look at what can we do internally, minimal effort, minimal risk, remember we're a risk adverse company. And so we took a look at our help desk and we created a virtual help desk ticketing agent. Workflows into other things, but you start there. And it was a big success. So from there, we said, let's take this further. But before we do that, let's put the governance in place now. So we put an AI policy in place. We actually formed an AI committee. That became important for the next most important thing, which is my two favorite words, collaboration and innovation. And so then we opened it up to the entire company. What do you have as far as ideas that you can bring to the table to help us generate generative AI? And no idea was dumb. No idea was too small. Bring it all up to the committee, and then we could go from there. And it's been a huge success story since then.
That's really interesting. So it's like kind of a democratic approach to implementing AI at the company. So like anybody has the opportunity to put their idea into a hat. And so the committee basically determines what you guys actually move forward with and implement.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Okay.
And the committee is a very balanced and collaborative, there's that word again, team of legal, risk, compliance,
Right.
and data privacy, of course, because that's very important, and procurement. So take all those folks together to become this AI committee.
So have you gotten any ideas, through this exercise to help your team?
Yeah, great question. So if you think about what generative AI can do, the layman way of thinking about it is translating language, helping me write a document. And those are things that some people in our company had brought to the table. But then for procurement, it was, hey, maybe we can use AI to help create a situation where instead of hearing internal customers complain about procurement, because they always do,
Right.
be part of the solution. So here's where that collaborative ideas come into play. And we've used it now for things like supplier onboarding, supplier research and discovery, creating RFP content, looking at ways that we can make the onboarding more seamless and quicker and more efficient. Again, being part of the solution, not just complain about it. And so that collaborative approach, having 4,000 plus members of our global team generate ideas, we've now taken that into procurement, and it's made a huge difference in how we can operate.
Really love that. I love being part of the solution because obviously, the perception of procurement sometimes isn't the best, right? And I think it's really easy for folks to complain about something they don't like, but it's not so easy to actually put forward a solution, right? It takes a little bit more work.
Right.
So just to double click, because I'm interested in the supplier onboarding piece. Can you tell me more about what you did there?
Yeah, so we looked at what are the manual steps today and
Right.
how can we create efficiency and automation? In other words, so someone wants to bring in a supplier. Well, have we vetted them financially? Have we looked at the country risk, or have we looked at, do they have an existing relationship with the company somehow? So kind of, if you think of a spider web, say, here's the decision tree number one, existing supplier, go here. Supplier that has financial risks that we need to assess, go here. And so all of those little roadways then come back together and say, okay, now we can onboard the supplier. Whereas before it was manual offloading, off email discussions, bring it back in. So now everything is in one place, and you've got the history as well. So now you can use that same approach to bring in another supplier.
Mhm. Yeah, we have definitely a tough time with supplier onboarding on my side. It's really interesting because I think that all of the elements where you sort of have human intervention, right? Like those are the areas that I think you could really point to first to try to put in an AI solution. So you're not wasting manpower like double checking details in a request or, doing that quality control check on the information, right?
Yeah.
There's just things that we can do that have unlock way more value than that. So I think that, I think putting AI in there is obviously a good way to, eliminate that. So to talk a little bit more about, these solutions that came forward. So how did that impact the image of procurement at your company?
Well, the best way I can explain that is there's a word you mentioned a little while ago, value.
Mhm.
If you think of the evolution of the function, purchasing became procurement. The word sourcing didn't even exist until the 90s in most dictionaries. Not that anybody uses dictionaries anymore, but if they did, right? And so there's been an evolution of the function. CPO, Chief Procurement Officer, I think is going to be obsolete in a few years. And I think it's going to be replaced by Chief Value Officer, because the traditional viewpoint of procurement is how much money are you saving the company? Reporting into finance. That's the traditional viewpoint. I actually think going forward, and it's happening today in some companies, the function reports into human resources or the people team, because it's a customer service, customer driven operation. And what does a customer service function do primarily? They add value to their internal stakeholders. And so I think being able to showcase that we're making speed to market quicker, we're able to get a business partner supplier onboarded much quicker. And let's say it's a supplier that they're doing business with externally. Now their product can go to market quicker because that supplier's onboarded. There's a lot of value in that. Did we necessarily save the company money? Not necessarily. But did we give them the runway to actually have product revenue? And that's the value.
That's so fascinating. It's fascinating that you say that, when you talk about that chief value officer, right? There's so many projects that, at least in my team, you mentioned it's like at some companies, right? I feel like my team is working on so many projects that are really not savings focused at all, right? It's more operational than that. It's more about creating efficiencies within processes, even that are outside of the procurement function,
Sure.
right? Which then unlocks that value that you talk about, right? It gives people back time. I think it's kind of taking on these projects that are sort of parallel to what procurement is doing, but still sort of impacts them in a certain way, right? Like it kind of just gets you to a point where you can, when your team is doing their like standard job of like savings and RFPs and negotiating contracts, it's almost like if you work on the process that the business unit is running, you can kind of unlock better information to then do your job later. You know, it's really interesting that I really like that chief value officer thing you mentioned. That's great. So to bring it back to AI just a little bit though, is there anything that you feel like folks are too bullish about when it comes to AI?
I think, yeah, it's a good question. If you think about when companies started utilizing cloud-based software, and there was this issue of, well, information's out in the public domain. We don't want to go outside of our company to have information. And what they didn't realize is there were a lot of software they were already using that was cloud-based. And so when that kind of epiphany hit the end user, the consumer, the internal customer, the stakeholder, whatever you want to call them, now you're thinking about AI the same way. Well, we have to make sure the information is protected. And we did a good job in making sure that that was the case here, because again, we're a risk adverse, highly regulated company. So having that committee is very, very important. This can stay in-house and it can only stay in-house. This we can actually leverage externally with AI. So I think that was the important part. And once we put that team in place, that governance behind it and the committee, the end consumer or the customers, the internal stakeholders, all had more ideas that they would share because they felt comfortable and safe about it. So that's the misconception about AI, that you have to worry about where the data is going. You should worry about it, but there's things in place to help govern that.
I think another thing people worry about is like, is AI going to take my job? Right?
Great
Like,
question.
yeah. What do you think about that?
I think that's a fantastic question. And if you're thinking that way, then AI should take your
Yeah.
job.
Right. Because it really, I don't know, maybe I'm too naive about the topic or, I just think that it unlocks so much for a person, right? Like it almost gives you more hours back in the day.
Oh, 100%. And
Like, because
yeah,
we all do things in our day that we just shouldn't have to be doing. You know what I
right,
mean? It doesn't matter what level you're at. There is something in your day that can definitely be automated, right?
right.
And it will just give you more time to focus on things that are more meaningful, you know?
Oh, spot on. I couldn't agree with you more. If you think about procurement having to spend so much time on negotiating a contract or conducting an RFP or analyzing the RFP, if you take a lot of those steps away and make them automated, now you've freed up time to do what? Add more value.
Right.
You can have more meaningful conversations with strategic partners, suppliers about innovation and how anything the supplier has done with other customers can be leveraged with your company.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing. It's not going to take away your job. It's going to allow you to do your job with more value.
Yeah. Do it better.
Yeah,
Faster.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
know. And I think one thing that I struggle with personally is like working the muscle, to gravitate towards using AI where previously I was going to Excel or something,
Sure.
right? Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, old habits die hard. There's
Yeah,
no question
for
about that.
sure.
I think once you have people getting on board and they see for themselves how it's made their life easier, that's when things will happen. I always like to tell my teams, and this is not just now, I've kind of always done this. You have to divide your work into one of four squares. And if it doesn't fall into one of those, don't do it. And that's a hard thing for people to master. But once they see how AI can get them into one of those boxes, they come on board.
Right. And what are those boxes?
Well, it's if you're talking about sourcing, it's negotiating, it's business partner relationships, it's delivering value, and the fourth one is what everybody always forgets and draws a blank on what it is. And nobody on my team has ever gotten that one right. The fourth one is themselves. Give yourself some time, and that's why AI can give them back the time.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I love that. I'm definitely going to steal that from you.
Yeah.
um, so, talking a little bit more about AI at your company and kind of like the democratic approach that you took to it, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the other things that were implemented throughout the company that are not procurement focused?
Well, the first thing that we did as a company, we have a pretty good DevOps team, and we actually developed an internal version of ChatGPT. And so it's been great, robust, and it keeps growing and learning. One thing that's also done is not just procurement, but it helps in procurement is it allows you to create a customized persona so that chat GPT internal version knows you, it gets to know you better, and can actually bring you research that it knows you're going to ask for even before you
Wow.
do. Yeah, so that's very cool.
Wow. That's unbelievable. So if you had just like one wish, I'm talking about like genie in a bottle sort of thing, what would it be? AI related, something that you could implement for your team?
I think I just thought of it. Light bulb went off of my head. Not that one either. It would be using that persona idea, right? Create metrics based on who your business partner audience is. And what I mean by that is the traditional viewpoint of procurement savings is you show the CFO how much money we've saved, what spend are we managing of the total spend, right? The 80/20 rule of our suppliers. But if you go outside the CFO office, nobody cares about any of those metrics. Like, so what? What does that mean for me? So based on who your audience is, create the metrics that associate with them. If someone's in sales, the speed to market, the cycle time of getting a supplier on board. Great, I can start working with this third party even quicker. Thank you, procurement. Or accounts payable, accounts receivable, DPO versus the DSO. Get them those metrics quicker. all those different audiences will say, aha, see, I knew procurement added value
Right.
in different ways.
Right. And
Yeah.
the savings thing is so true, because whenever we present it to folks that are like not in finance, the number one question is like, okay, so what happens with that money? Do I get it back into my budget? Right? Can I
Exactly.
use it
Yeah.
to do something else?
Right.
I mean, it totally, it's so true, because the way that something that's been a huge emphasis for us, at least, is like the cycle times, right? Reporting on those cycle times, not only to, to the business units, but also to the folks that are involved in the procurement process, right? So it's
Right.
not just procurement, even though we bear the perception, right? We're
Exactly.
not, we're not overseeing all of the teams that are involved in the process. So I feel like the cycle time reporting is a really good way to keep people accountable on their end of the bargain throughout the process.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And so for cycle times, at your company, how many groups are involved in, any given supplier that's being onboarded? Like, let's talk about the most robust, risky type of supplier. How many groups is that, supplier going through?
Yeah, so you have procurement, obviously. You'd have the business partner, legal, IT risk, data privacy, compliance, maybe someone in technology that's doing an evaluation of the product if it's
Right.
software. So you could have 9 to 10 different touch points. And so if you don't have that automation, the workflow, that's where the business partner gets annoyed with procurement and they say, it's taking so long. What's going on? Right.
Are you using some sort of orchestration tool?
Yeah, we are. We have a supplier onboarding tool. No free commercials here, but we do have a supplier onboarding tool, and then we've kind of married that with our AI technology, and so it will feed into the next step automatically.
Right.
We actually took AI into our sourcing pipeline too. So we had this. I guess you could call it an Excel-based report. Someone has a project, come into procurement, enter into there, but then we put that into an automated product, and then we created workflows from there. So the second that someone enters on my team a new project, it will now workflow legal, heads up, contract coming your way. So they get a proactive notification that it's coming. If it's software, the IT risk team, data privacy, they get a heads up too that it's coming. So it speeds up the internal review, which obviously helps the cycle time.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So, any last words or pieces of advice that you have for anybody listening that wants to implement something like your company did, where that democratic approach to AI and implementing, these solutions, what would it be?
Yeah, I would think, procurement is changing. It always has changed. Like I said, from the way it used to be called to what it is today, it's going to continue to change. AI is not going to be something that takes over your job. It's going to allow you to evolve and grow and add more value to the company. So use that committee approach and let everybody a part of it, and you'll have success too.
Love it. I think that's it for today. Thanks so much
Fantastic.
for chatting with me.
Thanks for having
Really
me.
interesting stuff. Thanks.
Great stuff.
All right.